people here are still feeling a huge economic pinch, hard to find work. In your opinion, finance guru, when will a true financial recovery for Americans not involved in the stock market take place?
Well, you made a comment there, King, about do the rich get richer? And ironically, Barack Obama, while he was president, had spoken a lot about income inequality and redistribution of wealth. Yet during that time period, the wealthy continued to get wealthier. So to some extent, it's really hard to engineer that. But specifically to your question related to the surge in the stock market and financial recovery, not everyone is invested in the stock market. So as the stock market is surging during this run, and let's see how long it lasts, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is going to get, and I want to emphasize this, a direct benefit. There's far more to financial recovery than just the market going up. However, when you do look at the stock market going up, technically there is an increase in wealth. And as a result of that, trickle-down economics, whether you believe in that or not, there is going to be an increase in spending. And as the nation spends more, that is actually, to some extent, redistribution of wealth and moving money around so people have the opportunity to have a job and make more money. Now, the stock market is a key part of the economy, but it's not the sole indicator of what's going on in the economy, because if you think about it, not every single stock is going up. So when you look at it that way, it's say, well, you're invested in one stock, I'm invested in another, and your stock's going up and mine is not. Well, the only thing that matters to me is what's going on with my stock. Kind of reminds me of a quote from Ronald Reagan back in 1980 when he was running against Jimmy Carter, and he actually defined recession, depression, and recovery, and you may be familiar with this. He said, recession is when your neighbor loses his job, depression is when you lose your job, and recovery is when Jimmy Carter loses his. And which I thought was really a great statement. But the real point there, King, is economic recovery is very, very personal. The definition of economic recovery is when it meets or exceeds peak employment prior to an economic downturn. So you have to look at it globally, but people don't look at it that way. They're saying, what's happening with me?
Right.
The economic indicators go beyond the stock market. You talk about GDP, gross domestic product. Well, that's been stagnant. The employment rate, well, it's up, but it is also a little bit deceiving, and certainly corporate profits are up. So I think that we're going in the right direction. And to some extent, you can say, well, the rising tide lifts all boats. But in terms of true financial recovery, we are not there yet. And I think a lot of that financial recovery is going to be predicated on two things: what happens with health care and what happens with Donald Trump's proposed tax cuts.